Yeah, it's so nice when devotees come and visit, just like you and your group from New Jersey came. And I was alone, uh, just started Mangalartik, and the door creaked open behind me, and I turned around. There were like 50 devotees from New Jersey. So, of course, I was born in New Jersey. I grew up in Morris County, in a small town named Chatham. So, I have some still affection from back then. And this process of Krishna consciousness is so incredible. We are all so incredibly fortunate. And of course, many people say, well, were able to take initiation from Srila Prabhupada. You had Srila Prabhupada's association. You're so fortunate. Well, it's one thing, and what I usually tell them, it's one thing to take initiation from a spiritual master like Srila Prabhupada, and it's quite another thing to become qualified for his mercy, because it just and it was incredible. The early days of the movement were just so special. And when I was writing, you asked me to write a little bio, and when I was writing, I got really absorbed in how the movement started in the early days. I joined in 1972. My brother joined a little bit earlier. He first saw Srila Prabhupada in 1967 at the Mantra Rock concert in San Francisco, and then took up the process of chanting and eventually joined the movement. I joined in 1972. And when I joined, it was such a magical time because, it was the early days then. And we had these temples, and we really had no idea how we were going to maintain them. And back then, we had the Bhagavad Gita. We didn't have Srimad Bhagavatam. Small parts of it gradually began coming out. And then we got Krishna book. And in the beginning, I was going, my Bhakti leader was Jayananda Prabhu. And I think pretty much everyone knows who Jayananda was, one of the early saints in the movement. And he was helping maintain the temple by driving a taxi. He was so incredibly humble. And he was my Bhakti leader. And the Bhakti program was going down to downtown San Francisco every day and doing Harinam, Sankirtan, for about 8 hours a day. And we would, on the way down there, we had this huge bucket of simply wonderfuls that we would bring down and distribute. And Jayananda had a very strict rule. He was very strict. And that rule was that once we get down to the Sankirtan place downtown, then no one can have any simply wonderfuls. But on the way down, you could eat as many as you want. And we were new devotees. And, as Americans, most of you, I assume, are of Indian descent. And so you all grew up pretty much vegetarian. So most of us were meat eaters when we were young. And the experience of prasadam just totally blew us away. We became attached and addicted, actually, really early on. And so we would go down to Market and Powell in downtown San Francisco, and we would pass out sticks of incense, ask people for donations. And when they gave us the donation, we would give them a Bhakti Guided magazine. And we had no idea that we could actually sell books because we didn't have any in the beginning. And then gradually they started coming out. And gradually we found out we could actually sell books on the merit of the book to people outside the movement, just regular meat-eating people who'd never heard of Krishna before. And this was an amazing, it continues to be a really, really amazing process. And one of my early friends in Krishna consciousness was Vaisheshika Prabhu, which of course is famous all over the movement for his, incredible inspiration in terms of, distributing books. And this is what really helped ensure our purity in the early days of the movement. And so just having Prabhupada on the planet at the time, even if he wasn't in your area, was so incredible, because you knew in the back of your mind, if worst came to worst, Srila Prabhupada was there, and you could approach him with a letter or just some advice or whatever. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't know really where to start sharing. Maybe we go with just devotees' questions, and we can maybe work from there. What do you think?
Yes, Prabhu. Whatever you desire to, please go ahead.
Um,
I have a question.
yes,
What was that you said Jayananda Prabhu had a he was strict about? What
he
was
was
his rule?
the rule was no. Once we arrived at our Sankirtan spot, which was downtown San Francisco, no one could have any Simply Wonderfuls. But in the van on the way down, we could all eat as many as we wanted. So I remember when the books started coming out, and I went downtown one day and they distributed 4 Bhagavad Gitas. And I came back to the temple and all the devotees crowded around me. They were saying, "How did you do it? But that's incredible, 4 Bhagavad Gitas." And then every day devotees started selling more and more. And then devotees started going door to door. And we had these little sets of Krishna books, little small, it was a trilogy, 3 paperback volumes. And some devotees started selling 10 books or 10 sets, and then 20 and 30. I remember when a devotee went out and distributed 100 sets. And, and then we started doing traveling Sankirtan. And when I was traveling on Sankirtan, I got my acceptance letter from Srila Prabhupada. And, they have something called, it says, purity is a force, and books are the basis, and utility is the principle. So I was traveling on Sankirtan, and I had to get my fire sacrifice. So they had me go to the closest temple at the time, which was New Vrindavan, in 1973, and I had my fire sacrifice and got initiated here. And then within a week, I was out and back on Sankirtan again. And then, the first wave of devotees that Prabhupada brought back to India in I believe it was 1967 or 68. Prabhupada brought some devotees, and they went to Mumbai, and they were going out on Harinam Sankirtan every day. And people in Mumbai were looking at us. They couldn't believe it. Who are these, Westerners from meat-eating culture, now clean-shaven with dhotis and tilak, women with saris, following our tradition, our religious tradition, more seriously than we are. And so they couldn't believe it. Front page articles started coming out in the newspapers saying they're probably CIA agents. And so Prabhupada thought that if he had these big, magnificent temples in some of the most important holy places in India, specifically Mayapur and Vrindavan, it would add some legitimacy to the movement. So I was asked to go with a small group of devotees who went to Japan, and we raised funds to build a temple in Mayapur and in Vrindavan. And the incredible benefit of that was that every year we got to go to the Vrindavan and Mayapur festival and sit at Prabhupada's lotus feet every day and hear him give Bhagavatam class and then attend his Guru Puja. And so that was, incredible opportunity. So I'm wondering maybe if devotees have some specific questions they want to ask.
Yeah, there are a couple of devotees have questions. Ashish Prabhu, Ashish Pachori. You want to ask some questions?
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question in your initial days following ISKCON, what kind of challenges did you face in America specifically, talking about Krishna ji, and how did you overcome it? Especially it was very new for Americans, right? So
Yeah. It was difficult approaching non-devotees. With books, we had no experience of anything. It was just a new adventure. But it was by the practice of Krishna consciousness, Krishna empowers us to do things we never knew we could do. I mean, it was our process of living with devotees and waking up early, chanting rounds, going to Mangalartik, and following the chain of command. I mean, it's very different now, because back then the only way you became a devotee was to join the ashram. It was all brahmacharis, brahmacharinis living in the temple. So whatever challenges were there were overcome, by our close association and our feeling are so dependent on the association devotees and following the temple program, so that we would develop enough spiritual strength we could go out and approach non-devotees and sell books. And so it was a little bit different in the sense that everything was about book distribution back then. And so the preaching spirit was so strong that it really helped us overcome these huge challenges we had in the beginning. It's a little bit different now. Many of our temples are maintained by congregation and in different ways. Most devotees are working and are living outside. So I think that was a huge benefit that I had back then, because we would it says that all the rules and regulations of devotional service, and there's many rules and regulations, but the essential two rules are: number one, always remember Krishna, and number two, never forget Krishna. And all the other rules and regulations are servants of these two principles. So we took that very seriously, because we were out there among the ordinary people all day long. And we were either chanting or actively distributing books. And so the only mixing that was done went on a purely Krishna conscious platform. And of course, in the beginning, especially coming from meat eater, the sense is sometimes, you'd pass a donut shop and think, oh, how nice it would be to have a donut or this or that. There are always, different challenges that we get in our mind. And sometimes it's very difficult approaching non-devotees. But it was the power of that devotee association that really made us feel like we were always protected. And even when we were out on Sankirtan, if we had any little break at all, we would immediately be chanting Hare Krishna, or we would have a Bhagavatam in our bag, and we would immediately bring it out and start reading. And that intensity of always trying to remember Krishna and never forget him was really helped us develop really a lot of spiritual strength that in my older days in Krishna consciousness now always comes back to remind me. And I consider it my goal at this point is to try to keep those principles alive as much as possible.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Yeah, the devotees, if you have other questions, you can ask. In the meantime, I'll ask one question. Prabhuji, if you can elaborate some of the most memorable pastimes with the Srila Prabhupada.
Okay, so I'll tell you, when I was a young devotee in San Francisco, and I think I'd only been in the temple 4 or 5 months. And I knew philosophically, I accepted that Prabhupada was my spiritual master. But I wanted some direct confirmation. And Prabhupada came and visited San Francisco and stayed for a few days. And he would take, every day he would take his, of course, his morning walks. And even back then, in 1970, that was by the time he came, maybe early part of 73. And I was a new devotee, and we had a chain of command. And so it was a little bit difficult to be able to go on a morning walk as a new devotee, because there was a GBC, sannyasis, temple president, and I was a very new devotee. I don't remember how, somehow I was invited to go on that morning walk. And I'd never had, a one-on-one time, with Srila Prabhupada. I mean, even when Prabhupada was staying, he would stay over Jayananda's. Still, it was a very, I was a new devotee sitting in the back. And so I got to go on this morning walk. And, on his morning walk, Prabhupada would be walking and maybe see something, or devotee would ask something. And then Prabhupada would start explaining the philosophy and relating things that we would see out on the street to Krishna consciousness. And so I kept intensely looking at Srila Prabhupada during the walk and trying to catch his gaze. And every time I'd look at him, he would look away, it seemed like, or he would look up and just immediately avoid my gaze. I mean, thinking about it now, it was almost like I was, kind of trying to capture Krishna or the spiritual master on my terms. And so he kept avoiding my gaze, and I just gave up. I think it'll never happen. Somewhere to the end of the morning walk, all of a sudden Prabhupada looked. He planted his cane in the ground, which he would do, and like he'd start making a philosophical point, and then he looked up, and he looked directly in my eyes, and it was so incredibly powerful. I had to close my eyes. In that second, I have no idea what happened, but here was this mystical experience I had. I closed my eyes, and I felt that in that split second I had my eyes closed, Prabhupada grabbed my soul and took me to the beginning of time of my sojourn in the material world. And the next instant, he took me to the end of my sojourn in the material world. And when I opened my eyes, I had a mystical experience that Prabhupada was Trikaligya, and he knew everything about me, past, present, and future. And I had this it's hard to explain, but this this absolute faith that Prabhupada is my eternal spiritual master, knows everything about me, and will be with me. He was here in the beginning of when I first came to the material world somehow or other, and he will be there when I'm leaving this world. Incredible. Within a couple moments. Many devotees had many experiences like this. When you listen to the memories, Prabhupada memories, a devotee like Mataji, who is very shy and really had some burning desire to connect with Prabhupada in some way, and feeling really insignificant and unworthy, and just standing on the side when Prabhupada maybe came into the temple room or came back from a morning walk, and would come up to her and maybe hand her a flower and look in her eyes, and immediately the devotee would understand Prabhupada knew what they were thinking and would immediately reciprocate with the devotee. Incredibly so mystical. It was like Prabhupada was, it was like Krishna, he was so incredibly conscious of Krishna. There's that time when a devotee when Prabhupada was in Mayapur, and he was sitting in his room reading one of his books, and a devotee came in and said, offered his obeisances and said, Srila Prabhupada, sorry to bother you, but I have to ask you. He said, you wrote these books. Why are you sitting in your room reading the books that you wrote? Prabhupada looked down and he said, my books? He said, I didn't write these books. Krishna wrote them. And so Prabhupada was like a scribe. Krishna was dictating through him. Prabhupada was seeing Krishna face to face at every moment. And you can see it. I had also the incredible good fortune that when our party, our Sankirtan party from Japan went in 1976, we went to the festival of Mayapur, and we went there a couple of months early before the festival for some reason. I guess we maybe had to get back to Japan or something. And Prabhupada was there at the time, and Prabhupada was very, very connected with these very special projects in Mayapur and in Vrindavan, because it's the Dham, and Prabhupada wanted to make sure that everything, every little aspect of the construction, everything was done properly. So we came early for the festival. Prabhupada was there, and after we were there just a couple of days, Jayapataka Maharaj, who I think everyone knows, he's been running Mayapur since the beginning. And he came into Guru Kripa Swami was the leader of our party. And we were all sitting with him in the room, and Jayapataka Maharaj came and said, Guru Kripa, he said, I have an emergency. I don't have my temple commander. Something happened to the temple commander, and he had to leave or got really sick or whatever. He said, I need a temple commander. I need, please give me one of your men. And so Guru Kripa immediately looked at me, he said, Banabhatta is your man. So I became temple commander in Mayapur for it was only about 4 or 5 months. But the incredible benefit of that is I had open door policy with Srila Prabhupada. And so anytime without being announced or anything, I had carte blanche to go in his room and, get help for whatever I needed. But I was very shy in those days, and very, thinking anytime I was around my spiritual master, I was probably just bothering him. But I would go. He was, of course, very famous by that time, all over India. And Prabhupada was so incredibly generous with his time, and he would invite all kind of guests would come from all different parts of India and come into his room. And Prabhupada would meet with them and talk, very friendly with them, preach to them. And so I would go into the room when I had some extra time, and I would go in there and go over to the corner and sit like a fly on the wall. And I would just watch Prabhupada speak. I couldn't understand him because he was speaking in different, either Bengali or Hindi or different dialects. but I would just watch my spiritual master and I would study his gestures, his hand movements. It says the face is the index of the mind. It was like, even though I couldn't understand what he was saying, it was like watching a Bhagavatam class in motion. And I was just every second just amazed. It's again, it was just indescribable. I mean, you know, Krishna arranged Prabhupada to come at this time when technology was developing. So we have all these incredible videos of Srila Prabhupada. And you can, you know, you already get the sense of you know, of who he is and how he's completely you know, in another dimension and in another reality. And, you know, the incredible benefit and also the detriment or the danger in some ways is that Prabhupada, inconceivably, when we were with him, he brought us up to his level. And we were enjoying a level of Krishna consciousness that none of us had ever experienced before. And really no words can describe. And it was, and you know, so like I mentioned, we would sit at you know, in Bhagavatam class at Prabhupada's feet, hear him give Srimad Bhagavatam class. And then he would stay on the Vyasasana and we would offer Guru Puja to him. And everyone, devotees would come up and offer flowers to Srila Prabhupada. And then when the song was over, but the kirtan was still booming, Prabhupada would gradually walk down off the Vyasasana and he'd go into the temple room. Now, those of you who have been to Mayapur, you'll know, because the temple room now is at least twice as big as it was back then, but half of it is like it was. And so Prabhupada would get off the Vyasasana, and as soon as he would touch the temple room floor, he would start walking to the opposite end of the temple room where there's a bell with a long rope. And there's still one, both on that side and on the other side. And there was back there in 1976. As soon as Prabhupada would start walking towards that bell, we would race as fast as we could to see who would get there first. And the first person that got there would grab the rope of the bell and wait for Srila Prabhupada to come. And then Srila Prabhupada would come and he would grab our hand. And then we would squeeze our hand out and he would grab the bell and he would gong that bell to the beat of the kirtan. And like Prabhupada's monkey army, we would jump as high as we could, you know, trying to jump higher and higher than the other devotees. And Prabhupada would raise his hands, encouraging us higher, higher. And it was so incredible. And as temple commander, actually, I don't know if I should be saying this, but I got the opportunity to chastise the entire GBC body when I was there. Because, you know, during the GBC meetings, they took place right around the time of Sundarartik. And so none of the devotees who were in the GBC meetings would come to Sundarartik. And hardly, because they were up late and late, having their GBC meetings, hardly any of them were coming down to Mangalartik. And so I thought maybe Prabhupada should know. So I went into his room and I said, Srila Prabhupada, offer my obeisances. I said, Srila Prabhupada, I just thought you should know that when you come down for your Guru Puja in class, of course, all the devotees, all GBC, sannyasis, everyone is there. But I want you to know that in Mangalartik, hardly any of the leaders, the GBC, only a couple of sannyasis, because back then, at least many of the sannyasis were GBCs as well, are coming to Mangalartik. And, you know, it's just all pretty much the rank and file devotees. And Sundararti, what to speak of Sundararti? I mean, there's a couple people come to Mangalarti. Sundararti, nobody comes like that. I just thought you should know that everyone's there during your Bhagavatam group, but that they're not coming to Mangalarti. And they're certainly not coming to Sundararti at 7:00 p.m. So Prabhupada said, okay, thank you very much. Sent me out. He called all the GBCs in there, all the sannyasis. He said, okay. He said, from now on, your GBC meetings will end. I think it was like a half an hour before Sundararti. You must all attend Sundararti. What to speak of Mangalarti? You must all be there. And I remember the first morning at Mangalarti when all the leaders in the movement were there. And, it's like Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita in the purport, he says, faith is created by the association, in the association of devotees. And I could feel that. I could feel my faith just come to this really high level. And I felt, wow, yes, this is a big international movement. Maybe we can take over the entire world for Srila Prabhupada someday. So that was a wonderful, wonderful revelation. Any other questions come to mind?
That's a beautiful story, Prabhu. You just brought that alive, like as if it's happening in front of us. So thank you. I have a devotee. Tracy is having a question. Tracy, you can go ahead.
Thank you for accepting my question, accept my humble obeisances, Your Grace. And first of all, excuse the disturbances in the background. I'm currently at work right now in Florida. Like I make time for Krishna.
Yeah,
Yes.
glad you could be here.
Thank you so much for accepting me. And I wanted to ask you a question. I've been a recent devotee for about a year now, and I've been having a desire to take on family life and establish a household, to share my my path to a spiritual life. Now, I know I can't really have a confliction within me. If you don't mind giving me insight about what I should do, I've been wanting to take a more spiritual purification path, as far as, of course, going to Varnashram, like in Alachua. I live in Florida, so Alachua is like right up the street from me, but I have a full-time job and I'm in college right now, so that's not really in the cards for me at this moment. But I wanted to ask, would you encourage me to live in the ashram and live as a brahmachari first before taking on family life and those type of commitments, or go as I'm going right now? Hopefully, I'm making myself clear.
Good question. Yeah, I would strongly encourage you, because especially in the beginning, when the tradition is at a very young age, a spiritual aspirant would go to the Gurukula, the ashram of the spiritual master, and live there as a brahmachari. And that training and that having that association with devotee in the beginning stages of our spiritual development is really, really important, because we all have these really subtle conditioned tendencies within our heart and within our mind, and getting some deeper insights into the practice and into our spiritual nature is really essential, because our success in taking up a situation like a family life will be in being a responsible husband and a responsible father, and being able to have come from a strong spiritual platform where we can actually help people, because material qualification is really not, it certainly isn't enough. And even without that material qualification, if one does have a spiritual qualification, Krishna will make up for what we lack. I mean, you look at what, for example, what the devotees did here in the palace. They were all young kids. And, they were building a house for Prabhupada who would come and visit. And then a little over halfway through, Prabhupada passed away. And devotees were devastated. They thought he won't see this, he won't stay here. They felt like giving up. And then Krishna in their heart said, no, you should do something so incredible. The whole world will remember your spiritual master. Now, these were all really young devotees, but they really were dedicated to Prabhupada. But none of them had any college background or anything. And they learned how to do everything from scratch. If you see in the palace, there's, I don't know if I can actually move this to show you. Can you see that design on the floor?
Yes, Prabhupada.
So there's over 30 types of marble in the palace from about 17 different countries. And almost all the marble on the floor is called inlaid, which means there's nothing holding it together except the marble itself. And these are devotees who had no experience at all. And we've had people their whole life work in the marble industry, take tours of the palace, and they couldn't believe it. They're like, nobody does this level of work without 10, 20, 30 years experience. And after thousands of tours, millions of people walking through here, we've had to replace almost none of the marble. So, this was a special contribution that Prabhupada gave to us too. And this is a very essential, important aspect about our philosophy. And that is to, accept the spiritual master and to accept the order of the spiritual master as our life and soul. And because Prabhupada had that, but he didn't have any money. He had no friends in America. He had a sponsor but never met him before. And he had no health. He had 2 heart attacks on the boat on the way over. And Krishna, within 2 years, he had over 1,000 followers, 25 temples in the United States, Canada, and in Europe. And devotees, like Prabhupada, we became empowered to do things we never thought possible. And so this inconceivable energy of Krishna, which we experience by chanting Hare Krishna and by associating devotees, our soul starts to become awake. And we start to realize we're not these physical bodies. We're eternal spiritual beings. And we have a divine purpose on this earth. And so I recommend that, we activate that as much as possible, because otherwise, if we don't have that, and besides, I would also encourage you when you do get married, to take it really slowly and really patiently, and really depend on Krishna to help you make the right decision, because a decision like that can really make or break an entire lifetime. And so it's a very, I really appreciate your question, because I see you're intelligent and you want to do things in a way that will really help you on all levels. Because when we do things with Krishna in the center and consulting also our other devotees, then we can, it helps us to end up making a decision that will be in our highest welfare.
Jai, Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Yeah, and even if have you visited Alachua before?
Yes, sir. I frequent Alachua many, many times. I consider it, I'm almost considering the house that I'm living in my second home compared to Alachua. I live in Jack. Alachua was like my first home, man. And every morning on their YouTube channel, I follow their Mongol Artiques in the morning when I get home from work.
Yeah, nice.
I work the first shift. So by the time I get to the house at 2:30, I don't go to bed until their Mongol Artique is done live. And then I'll go ahead and go to sleep.
Good for you. Wow, that's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah. All glories to you. May Krishna and Prabhupada empower you so you can excel in your spiritual pursuit.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. And I intend to visit you in New Vrindavan. I've been wanting to go there for a very long time. It'll be very auspicious of me to come see you someday.
Oh, yeah, it'll be wonderful. Yeah, we'll do a lot of hearing and chanting together.
I would love that.
Jabba, what's your name?
Tracy.
Tracy. Hare Krishna, Tracy. Nice meeting you.
Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy Prabhu. And we have next question from Sankri Kaur Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my most respectful obeisances at your lotus feet. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhu, I was just thinking that Srimad Bhagavatam sets are so easily available to us now. For that matter, Chaitanya Charitamrita and other books. I would want you to recall those times when at your times, one canto was coming at a time, one volume coming at a time, and the exhilaration among devotees, because I've heard my Guru Maharaj, His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu, tell this one time that for us, getting books were a luxury, and we would just wait for months together for a canto to come and then read. So we would just, if you could recollect, because Bhadra Purnima is coming and devotees are getting encouraged to distribute some Bhagavatam sets around. So any inspiring story would be great.
Well, of course, Vaishesi and I have a very close connection. I actually took him out on his very first traveling Sankirtan party together. We went to Tucson and distributed books. And yeah, it was such a magical time because when they started coming out, and even Chaitanya Charitamrita, I remember when that started coming out, there was a small book, a paperback book called Lord Chaitanya in 5 Features. And we were distributing those books. Yeah, I'll be honest, my memories of those early days are very selective, and I don't remember too many specific instances on when the Bhagavatams started to come out. But I do remember we were very enthusiastic about reading them and distributing them. And of course, Bhagavatam is so important. Prabhupada himself translated the first canto before he came to America. And yeah, I don't know what to share from there. Sorry.
Prabhu, one more question, if by your permission.
Yeah.
What was that thing that got you to? It made you feel that, okay, this is my life's mission. I know that your brother was already into the movement and you got introduced to the movement, but what was that factor for you to tell you that this is it for me? That's the deal for me.
Well, I graduated from high school in Michigan, and although my brother wanted me to stay there because Prabhupada was coming that summer, I remember I had a little bit of fear in my heart because I wasn't really ready. I didn't feel ready at all, and I was really somewhat of an impersonalist. I was studying like Zen Buddhism, and this idea of a personal God was difficult for me to wrap my head around. So I wasn't really ready to join the temple back then. And, but I graduated from high school. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So most parents wanted the kids to go to college. So I went to a small liberal arts college in New Hampshire. And I took a philosophy course. I was really excited, thinking that would be really good. But I started taking the course and it was really distasteful because all these students that had already been there 1 or 2 years before and had already, studied some philosophy. They were really puffed up, and they were, always giving their puffed up opinions of things. And I really didn't. I was a very unmotivated student, except for theater, and I really liked the theater. And at the end of the theater, my theater teacher told me, he said, Bill, I think you have some talent. If you come back next semester, I'll give you better roles. And I said, Mr. Bennett, I love the theater. I'm learning so much about self-expression. You're a great teacher, but I have to be completely honest. He said, what's that? I said, well, I'm playing the parts of so many different people. He said, well, yeah. He said, well, I have no idea who I am. Who am I? Well, he could not answer that question. So I left school with a friend of mine, and we hitchhiked, which I don't know if anyone does anymore. So many crazy people out there, but a lot of kids did that back then. And we hitchhiked all the way from New Hampshire. We made it all the way out to California. Few adventures. Eventually, I ran into the devotees in San Francisco, and then all the memories of visiting Detroit Temple. My brother used to sometimes take me to Mongol Arctic, came into my mind. So I started with my friend who I hitchhiked with. We started visiting the temple every day. And I had a lot of questions. And every day I would come and ask questions for hours and hours. And this went on for about a month. And at the end of the month, and I was a hippie kid. I mean, back then, I was interested in Eastern spirituality, but other kids my age were interested in drugs, sex, and rock and roll. I had long hair all the way down my back. And I wasn't the kind of person that joins things. I was very independent minded, still very kind of absorbed in personalism. But all my questions were answered to my satisfaction. But I was really at a crossroads, and I thought, well, I don't want to join the temple, but all my questions were answered to my satisfaction. And if I'm actually honest with myself, I should join, and I should give it a shot. I mean, I could always, what they call blooper, always leave. So then I ended up jumping in the deep end, and my friend and I joined the temple. And we never looked back. And it was just so incredible, everything. The prasadam back then, the devotees, falling into this mode of being a servant, because in the West, especially too, we think of, servant. Who wants to be a servant? Want to be like master. But it's Prabhupada's writings are so incredible. There's a lot of things. He'll say one thing, one sentence, or even 3 words together or something. You can literally meditate on that your whole lifetime and have all kind of amazing realizations. And somewhere in his, I think it's somewhere in the Bhagavatam somewhere, Prabhupada says servitude is the most congenial form of intimacy. And I remember how, this gradually, as we go on in Krishna consciousness, this servant mood starts awakening within us, because that's our constitutional position. And the more we're acting according to that capacity, then we're happy inside. That's why Srila Prabhupada says Krishna consciousness is very simple for the simple-hearted, but it's also very complex, without having a very kind of a simple mindset like that, accepting our constitutional position. So anyway, that's how I ended up joining the temple.
That's glorious. Thank you so very much. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Next, Ranjan Prabhu.
Hare
Hey,
Krishna.
Gopal, also, I wanted to ask you, how much time do we have left?
Officially, we have as much as you want. Unofficially, depends on devotees.
Okay, because I didn't realize my phone has about 20% charge left.
Ah,
And I actually had to come to the palace because I couldn't, I didn't have enough,
Wi-Fi.
I have a new Wi-Fi system there, and I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to get on Zoom. So I did, and I actually forgot to bring my charger here. So, but I think that'll last probably another, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes or something.
I think that should be good enough, and we can ask 2 more questions maybe. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So Ramchandra Prabhu, you can go ahead, please.
So as you were mentioning earlier, that when you went to Mumbai, or the devotees went to Mumbai, and in a completely different country, and white-bodied Americans doing kirtan on the streets. Now, in the US right now, most of the time, most of the temples are Indian dominated, Indian bodied. So if when we go out for Harinam, it's the opposite. So you have a completely Western crowd, and here is a group of 10, 15 Indian bodied devotees. At least I'm speaking about New Jersey. So in that case, we feel the same way, like, will anybody listen to us or give importance? What tips would you give, or what would you say in that case if we had to go Harinam, Indian looking, dhoti kurta, and entire Western, completely opposite from the 60s and 70s?
Well, many different occasions Prabhupada said that, we're going out and performing Sankirtan to please Krishna, and not the, not the people on the street. And whether they accept us or don't accept us, it's so easy to get absorbed in these, becoming self-conscious and things. But it's completely transcending every idea, a mundane idea, or any conception we have about, what people are thinking out there. Everyone is getting such an incredible benefit out there. And I've been thinking a lot recently also how, and it's so great. I mean, I think I have one of the best services on the planet, because I give tours all day, every day, to all kind of people. And I gradually realize more and more how, and of course, in Prabhupada's presence, we realize that especially, how there's a completely different reality that's happening to our ordinary reality that we're pretty much consumed by in our modern society, in our jobs, in our families, that, we have to maintain all these things, and we may watch the news and hear about what's happening, but there's a whole nother transcendental reality happening on a whole nother level. And that's also what I kind of wanted to share a little bit for devotees on this call, because I think most of you are from Indian descent, which in itself is incredibly rare. And I was just reading in the Bhagavatam, 5th canto, talks about how, the Lord Chaitanya's movement, Lord Chaitanya is this, most incredible incarnation of God, who's giving what no other incarnation has ever given, ever before in human history on this planet. The highest level of love of God to the most unqualified. And how often does he come? He comes once in a day of Brahman. That's once every 4,320,000,000 years. And he came 500 years ago. What is 500 into 4 billion? That was like not even a split second ago. Krishna also came 5,000 years ago. So, I mean, this is an incredibly special time we've been born into. And now Krishna has done something through Lord Chaitanya that's never happened before. He's empowered his names with his own personal potency. That's never happened before. I mean, in days of yore, during these huge Vedic sacrifices and Treta Yuga, even Dwapara Yuga, Brahmins would chant mantras, and it was potent, you know, demigods would show up. Sometimes Vishnu would appear. But with what Lord Chaitanya's done, giving his mercy like this to the most, so, you know, we have to understand things in this universal context. It's good to remember that and help bring our perspective gradually to the transcendental level. You know, Prabhupada coming to America 40 years ago was not some random event. This was all happening, being orchestrated by Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada never left the planet. He left physically 40 years ago, but he hasn't left. Otherwise, how is it the movement is still spreading like wildfire all over the world? He was so present in his Vani. And this is why it's really, really important to spend whatever spare time we can in studying Prabhupada's books and distributing the books to give other people the same opportunity. Prabhupada said his purports are his devotional ecstasies. And he is fully present in his full spiritual potency in his writings. And when we sit down and we read, you know, Prabhupada's books, we're associated with Prabhupada personally. When we follow his instructions and do anything, go out on Sankirtan, Prabhupada's right there with us. He's never left.
And an observation also, because you mentioned how for 8 hours you would do nonstop kirtan. And in today's times, you know, generally a service like kirtan or anything else, we would think about an hour at a stretch or 2 hours max, and that's it. I mean, beyond that, it's like, phew. And we're not talking about devotees from another yuga. It's not like Dwapara Yuga or Treta Yuga. This is devotees going back maybe 30 years ago or 20 years ago, who would put in so much. What do you see has changed today? That is it our tolerance? Is it our determination, our love for Prabhupada, that everything is reduced, it seems?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I don't know exactly what to say, but Prabhupada knew it also. You know, if you study Prabhupada's life, you know, last year he was on the planet. He changed his preaching strategy because he saw so many of his sannyasis, you know, were falling down. You know, Prabhupada created a very top-heavy management system in ISKCON, which is continuing to this day. But he was, if you study his room conversations, his morning walks, you know, his classes back then, he was spending a lot of time talking about Varnashram, talking about farms. And here in New Vrindavan, there's a famous conversation where Rameshwar came to visit one time. Rameshwar, you know, was, of course, Prabhu was one of the leaders in the movement back then, in charge of the BBT and even in charge of Los Angeles Temple, which at that time was the world headquarters for Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada was in New Vrindavan, Rameshwar Prabhu visited, and Prabhupada told him, he said, devotees should come and move to New Vrindavan. And Rameshwar said, well, Prabhupada, devotees, yeah, you mean maybe a few brahmacharis or some, you know, a few grihastha couples. Prabhupada said, no, so many devotees should come and move here. It's so nice. And he said, well, Prabhupada, devotees live in the cities. They have jobs. Wouldn't it be better if they make their home into a temple and invite people there? Of course, it's true. Different times, Prabhupada said different things. So this particular time, here's what Prabhupada said. And when you hear this, you got to remember, Prabhupada was Trikala Gya. He could see the future. Prabhupada said, jobs. He said, what are those jobs? He said, those jobs will very soon be finished. He said, very soon, meaning within our lifetime, he said there'll be massive unemployment in the cities. He said there'll be millions of people leaving the cities. You hear, I've talked to Rameshwar Prabhu, and he said, Prabhupada said, he didn't say thousands. He said there'll be millions of people leaving the cities. He said, I want you to have farms. I want you to learn how to become self-sufficient and teach it to others. And so the world's changing, and there's a lot of changes going on right now. And who knows? There's a lot of different opinions of what's going on. But it's good we look from a spiritual perspective. And what I really see is happening is that it's almost like when Krishna was here and told the demigods, you know, I'm coming and I'm taking my birth. You told the demigods, you take birth in the Yadu dynasty. So many devotees here, many of you were all devotees in a past lifetime. And you've come here to assist Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. And I kind of think it's kind of like when Narada Muni approached Kamsa, he said, Kamsa, what are you doing? Like the demigods, your enemies, have taken birth. Krishna's taken birth. And you know, wake up. And then Kamsa said, oh, yeah, call the demons together. And I always thought when I heard that, I'm like, how could he do that? Kamsa's increasing his persecution of so many devotees because he wanted to accelerate, you know, Krishna's pastimes are coming. So I think a very similar thing is happening now. What's happening in the world, it seems like things are more and more, they're becoming so fast, more degrading and stuff with the whole COVID thing and stuff. Even so many opinions about the COVID, it almost seems like it's, you know, even among families, it's kind of torn people apart. Just so much kind of things are happening, you know, in the world, all this kind of friction on so many different levels. And I really think if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, Krishna's turning up the flame. And all these higher beings like yourselves are coming here, and Lord Chaitanya's movement, who has prophesied to spread, you know, become like a Satya Yuga for the next 10,000 years. So it's a very, very special time we're living in now. And actually in New Vrindavan, I'm not trying to criticize or anything. It is what it is. But Prabhupada left us specific instructions. I've actually moved to another area of New Vrindavan now, working with some of these devotees who've been here since the 70s to try to fulfill Prabhupada's original. Why did Prabhupada call it New Vrindavan? He envisioned these small replica temples like in Vrindavan and little villages growing around these temples. And I somehow or other, I started getting these realizations when I was living in Los Angeles, you know, that 10, 15 years ago, that these deep Vaishnava relationships, which are really the essence and so important as in us developing a higher level of Krishna consciousness, we can really access and cultivate those relationships in such a more kind of significant way when we're all working together in like in a farm, doing, you know, similar kinds of things. So now we've started a little. I send a Gopal Govind. Maybe you can send that to some other devotees if they're interested. You can see what we're doing. We have a Facebook page. It's called New Jamuna Valley Farm, and we're working, you know, seriously to try to, you know, become food independent. We're training oxen, and you know, we have the goal of gradually getting completely off the grid. I mean, this is also important what Prabhupada wanted us to do, and so while we can, we should preach like anything. But a time may be coming, as told us by Srila Prabhupada, when we won't be able to preach, and we'll have to take shelter of these communities, these farms, and protect the devotees and intensify our hearing and chanting. Anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Before I go to Tracy, Prabhu has a question. I just wanted to make an announcement to all the devotees that this Friday, we have a very special speaker attending our Friday Bhakti Vriksha program. We're going to have a joint Bhakti Vriksha in Ridgewood. This is a very special opportunity, so try not to miss it. And also on Sunday, he will be giving a class at the center. This is Patri Prabhu, who's originally from Ukraine, and he's a brahmachari who preaches in Nepal and India mainly. So he will be with us. And starting this Saturday, actually it starts on Sunday to Saturday, 17th to the 23rd, is the World Holy Name Week, Global World Holy Name Week. So our center is also going to participate in helping increase the chanting of the holy names. So we will be announcing on Friday the different initiatives that we are taking up. So what happens is collectively all over the world, there will be so much chanting going on, which will bring in such positive spiritual energy around the world. And we want to make some contribution to that as well. So stay tuned about it. And now we can go to Tracy.
Thank you once again. I wanted to first give a little bit of insight into an opinion that I have about the times that we're in the age of Kali Yuga, especially when you were talking about how when Prabhupada was saying all these jobs that we have, that we're working, how there's going to be millions of unemployment, millions of these things happening, when we're seeing the gross materialism of the corporate structure that we've been inundated with in America. Well, I'm not sure how it is in other parts of the country, but I know here for the Western born body, there's mass inflation, even the dollar itself, the very thing that we've been told to chase all of our lives is not even worth the money that it's printed on. And from Prabhupada, what he said years ago, it's coming to fruition. And so I just want to give that insight to validate what you just said, Prabhu. And you're absolutely right. When Prabhupada said that back then, it's coming to pass. And I believe that Sanatana Dharma in Krishna consciousness is the only spiritual body to bring refuge to people of all walks of life, especially, in America where I'm in right now. And so I have a question to ask. In a couple of years, the house that I'm living in right now is going to be paid off. It's going to be, it's going to be solvent. And I've had a desire to go into real estate. Okay, cool. Once I get done with this property, I'll go and buy other properties. Would you suggest that I go ahead and start that farm community or buy another home to, start a temple or do these things? Because what I want to do is I want to do it into the service of the Lord. But I just want to know how I could go about that in order to bring in what you're explaining. What would be the steps I would need to do to make that happen, Prabhu, if you can give insight to me about that.
I don't know, but I know that some of these people in the world who a lot of people consider them kind of trendsetters, and they watch what certain people do to see what certain trends in society are. And I know that, for example, Bill Gates has been buying up millions of acres of farmland, and not just thousands, millions of acres. They say many of the farms that were available or he negotiated buying, many farms for all the way from California to Ohio were bought up by him. So I think land, of course, people talk about precious metals, and especially land. I think land that, where you can grow things on will probably be one of the best investments going forward, I would think.
Thank you, Prabhu. This is an endeavor that I've been meaning to pursue, to be self-sufficient, to be self-reliant in that way, but also incorporate into a spiritual platform. So thank you for the insight, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Does anybody else have any question? Feel free to unmute. Well, there's nobody, it seems like. I have one more question, and that is, you are serving in New Vrindavan at the Palace Lodge, which at times would be very lonely, or if you don't have visitors and all. And even after so many years consistently serving, we know that consistency is a key in a devotee's life. How do you maintain that consistency? How should we maintain that consistency in service and our own spiritual sadhana?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And that really is the essence of everything. It reminds me of the question asked by Kapildeva's mother, Devahuti, after he has explained the whole Shankya yoga system. And she asked him, she said, everything you're saying, I can understand. It's all well and good. She says, but how is it possible for the mind to become detached from sense objects? Because when you just look at a sense object, even without consciously thinking about it, the senses just grab at it. And then Kapildev answers and he says, yes. He said, it's very, very difficult. He says, but it is possible. Similar to what Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, by constant practice and detachment. So there's two things. There's sincerity and there's seriousness. And I'm not sure of the exact, dictionary definition, but in my experience, sincerity means our condition of our heart, our willingness to take up the practice and to keep an inquisitive mind and a sense of almost like childhood innocence and always inquiring and being enthusiastic. And seriousness, in my mind, brings up the concept of a long, steady process that no matter what, we don't give up. It's just like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta used to tell his disciples, Prabhupada's guru used to tell them that, because they used to complain, sometimes we go to preach somewhere and there's just one or two people show up. And he said, when you go to preach, you should have zero expectations. You're simply engaging as a servant of Krishna. And if no one's there, then you preach to the four walls. And I think of that often. I think of how, in Krishna consciousness, we're performing so many different activities. We have so many different responsibilities and duties. But, things are happening externally. But internally, there's a whole world inside that we're just on the brink of discovering. Srila Prabhupada said that we should all be like research scientists, sharing notes, like a scientist on the edge of like an amazing discovery, because we're engaged in the ultimate process of scientific discovery, of spiritual inquiry, and it's really an exciting process. But sometimes it feels like drudgery, and sometimes we have to do things even though we have no enthusiasm, we have no energy, but we just do it because it's our duty. And that's how we get from a very neophyte level of Krishna consciousness to become very, very advanced. Like my dear friend Vaishesi would often say, he says, 90% of the battle is just showing up and to keep on keeping on. So we just have to, take this example from all these incredible examples we have in our line of these great acharyas, and pray and beg for their mercy. Gaur Govinda Maharaj was an amazing disciple of Srila Prabhupada and spiritual master. And he would often say that that we all have to learn how to cry for Krishna. And sometimes we may feel so alone and so unqualified and it is so overwhelmed. But when we show up and we show just whatever little enthusiasm, energy we have, Krishna, we have to understand Krishna's right there, smiling at us and just waiting. And what's that verse? Lord Brahma says in the Shamik Shamana, I'm not a big shloka person, but he says if one keeps on going on suffering his lot, then everything will be given to us, and we will attain the spiritual world. The Sanskrit word it's called dayabak, which means the son naturally inherits his father's property. All he has to do is stay alive, and he inherits that. So all you have to do is really stay alive in Krishna consciousness and agree to just, Prabhupada is this famous Vyas Puja offering. Prabhupada offered his spiritual master, I think it was in 1936. And he says in there, Prabhupada has this level of humility, they call it dainya, like intense humility, where Prabhupada says, I have no hope for any, I'm so fallen. I have no hope in many upcoming crores of lifetimes for achieving your mercy. But I, pray that I can just stay engaged and stay in this process of Krishna consciousness. So like that, we really have to just keep doing, our duty and, associate. We should endeavor to associate with like-minded devotees and devotees who we can see have, spiritual insights and are themselves really struggling, to advance in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness, it's not easy most of the time. If we feel it's very, very easy, then maybe we're really, really advanced, or maybe we're, not digging deep enough.